Hello, Guru Nation. Welcome to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. I've got Daniel Nadal. He's got a great name. So, hi, Daniel. How's it going? Great
How are
first
you?
name and great last name. He's the CEO at Next Phase Research and another company called ClinSearch. We're going to learn all about your career, Daniel. We want Guru Nation to be inspired because here's how this interview came about. I interviewed Carla, who was super inspirational. A lot of people commented on her video, and then she said, guys, she told me, if you think I'm inspirational, you should see Daniel. You should really interview Daniel and hear his story. So I was like, oh, okay, I think I know Daniel, and we've been connected for a while. We probably met before, but it's great to finally have like a actual conversation with you, Daniel. So welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. Unfortunately, having to follow Carla's is going to be a little hard. It's going to be hard for
It's
me to press
tough. It's
the
tough. I
masses.
mean, how do you go from a receptionist to like such a busy phase one site CRO monitoring service owner? You're turning down projects. But she said that your story is super inspirational also, so we would like to share some of that inspiration with everybody watching and listening, because maybe there's a Daniel somewhere watching right now in Iowa and they're like, oh,
There you go.
okay, maybe I can do this too. So welcome, Daniel. Thank you for very much for your time.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Can you give us like a brief background, how you got started, what made you look at research in the first place, and then we'll kind of move into next phase and ClinSearch.
Of course. Well, my family has been in medicine since I've been a kid. I was probably 13, I think, when my family got into the clinics and stuff like that. So I always had the background. I guess I shouldn't say this in public, but I was never very good at school. I never liked school.
Me either.
So, well, that's how my family got me to shape up, and I decided that I was smart enough to drop out. They're like, all right, you're going to get your GED at least, go to college, and you're going to go work for your aunt. So it all started there. I worked at a clinic. I was basically a receptionist. I was,
Wow.
with a bunch of older patients. Honestly, that's where it started. Honestly, how I got into research is about 5 years later. In my aunt's clinic, there was a gentleman that came and proposed research to her. So we had no idea what this research stuff was. It was kind of like it came out of left field.
Hmm.
So as we started seeing what it entailed, honestly, it just lit a fire on me from right off the bat. I'm like, hold on a second, what? Like, this
Where
is all
was
you
this
do?
clinic? Miami?
It was in Miami. It's actually called, people confuse it with the hospital. It was called Larkin Medical Center, because when she opened it, she was partners with the owner of Larkin Hospital. So long story short, they ended up not staying together. And then that's where I decided to be Mr. Slick and dropped out of high school. And then that's when the whippings began, basically. I learned a lot about the healthcare field. Honestly, research was one of the few things where you're dealing with sick people. I mean, mind you, obviously the trials I was involved in, but COPD, diabetes, it's not your hospital units where I'm not good at seeing over, people that are sick with nobody to talk to. I did study respiratory therapy. I forgot to mention that before. So drop out of school, get my first job, forced to
Drop
get
out of
my
high
GED.
school. Dropped out of high school.
Yeah, 16 years of age. I kind of dropped out in kindergarten mentally.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's not that I didn't like learning. It's just school wasn't for me.
It's a very
The way
common
they
trait.
taught,
It's a very
exactly.
common trait for entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you. Just never thought of myself as one, but I guess. But like I said, I mean, once I left school, my family didn't just let me sit on my butt. Like, hey, go get a job, and okay, you don't have a job? No, we got you one. Put me in there, learn all about the billing codes and dealing with little old people that are in a
So this was a
rush.
private practice or
Private, it was a clinic. Things have changed. It was called Larkin Medical Center.
okay.
Yeah, so it was just a PCP clinic. Nowadays the healthcare industry has changed a lot. It's all
Right.
managed care and big groups. Back then there was a bunch of little, private practices. But like I said, I mean, I learned a lot. The terminology. You work in something long enough, you get better at it. About 2 years after so wisely dropping out, then I realized, hey, I actually like what I'm doing. I want to learn more about it. So I actually started studying respiratory therapy.
Hmm.
And once again, I didn't finish what I started because I went all the way to the end. And at the end is when they put me in the hospital. Well, when I had to do bronchoscopies with the pulmonologist and, hospice and things like that.
But this entire time, no research yet.
No research yet.
Okay.
Exactly. I went all the way to the end. I dropped it. I worked in pharmacies. I worked in an ALF. I kind of drifted along, a bunch of dead end jobs, I guess you could say. It was no longer within the family. I kind of decided, hey, I want to go my own route. So, long story short, about 2 years after that, I called my aunt, tail between my legs, kind of like, hey, look, I've tried to make my own way and I wish I could go back to school. So she told me, hey, come work with me. I mean, I can't take you back to school, but I could teach you and you're going to learn from me what I do. So long story short,
That's a good aunt, man. That's a good aunt.
I owe her a lot. She actually owns an ACO now. So when the Affordable Care Organizations, she owns her own ACO. When I got into
we gotta
research
get her on the show too.
Oh, you let me know. She loves to talk.
Okay.
She's probably the most inspirational story of them all.
Each time it's Carla said, no, Daniel's more inspirational. Now Daniel said, no, my aunt is more inspirational. So we're gonna get all you guys on.
To be honest, anybody could be an inspiration. You know what I mean? If you start doing for you,
yep,
anybody could be an inspirational story.
Right.
It takes a big step to take I don't want to say financial independence, because before you get financial independence, you're gonna be begging for loans and things like that. But
exactly.
When it hits, and like I said, I mean, it takes a while, but if your work is good, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. You're just gonna have to maybe put up with a year, 2, 3, who knows? Everybody's story is different.
So basically, your aunt, what's her name?
Christina Pertiera. Well, Chris now, because now she went into the big corporate field, and now she calls herself Chris.
So Chris, your aunt basically said, hey, Daniel, come work for my clinic.
Exactly. And basically it was a huge clinic. I mean, we probably saw 40, 50 patients a day. It was very high paced. I was responsible for handling all the prior authorizations of Medicaid. I'd be the one writing the letters to FP&O. You can't cut these people's light, they're on an oxygen machine. Wow. But less than a year passed, and that's when I met the person who taught us research. So when I first see him in the office and I see him there with the patients and this and that, and the patients leaving, they actually got a check. And working in healthcare, if you don't know about research, you're kind of like, what, did you just give that patient a check? Are you out of your mind? And he's like, no, yeah, it's part of a consent form and this and that. So automatically, I fell in love with research. I was like, hold on. So you can pay the doctor, you can pay the patient. It's all out in the open.
Who was this guy? Some guy who integrated himself in your clinic?
He went and talked to my aunt. He proposed the business of opening up the research in there, that it could give her a lot of extra revenue. So, when I saw what research was about, I basically told my aunt, I'm like, hey, look, I want to do this. So she goes, okay. She's a businesswoman. She's like, okay, like, I'm not going to pay you a salary, but you go work for free. I had a lot of money saved, I had my money saved, but mind you, it's already been more than 10 years almost. It's been almost 10 years since I dropped out of high school. But by this point, like I said, I took a lot of twists and turns and ended up back with her. So let's say about 8 years after I dropped out. So I was 26. My kids were just born. I saw research as a career that I'm like, hey, this could be forever. I like it. You know what I mean? I'm very good at, whoever knows me says I'm a disaster, but like on my computer, everything is organized somehow. When it comes to research, I've always been very detail oriented and things like that. Honestly, from there, so we started the first year. It was free of charge. So I'm going to make this part very long story short for you. I went from having about $80,000 saved with my ex-wife to child with autism, separated, divorced, end of the year. It wasn't going to work out. My research dream was kind of like, hey, this isn't going to work out. It is. Research takes time.
Yeah, research takes time.
Takes time. Even though back then everything was a lot quicker, but I wasn't the boss, and I'm not an alpha. You know what I mean? Like, I really ain't an alpha. Like, I'd rather be part of the team. I don't.
So at this time, you were working still with this guy who came into your aunt's facility?
Exactly. So my aunt basically would bring in the doctors because she knew them all. This gentleman would bring the trials. I would do the work at his office, learn how to do everything.
The coordinator, basically.
Exactly. And at the beginning, I think I was like third in line. Back then, it was paper CRFs, which I'll never forget.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember the first trials I had were all, the best studies, honestly. I wish there were more of them. Erectile dysfunction trials. The line of patients was like from here to like 10 blocks down the road. Just, I want to be in, I want to be in. So it was kind of, we did a lot of HIV. We did a lot of erectile dysfunction with Pfizer and Levitra, because I
Mhm.
remember that was one of my first trials, one of my first monitoring visits. So, that was a disaster. I was just starting and didn't know anything of what I was doing, and it showed. It showed. Luckily, I've learned a little bit since then, and now my monitors are a lot happy with my performance.
Was your CRA very upset with you like they were with me on my first study?
To be honest, the thing is that I went from, like I said, I was third in line. So the
Mhm.
guy had me basically doing EDC entries, which back then was you either had a laptop that Pfizer sent you for each
Yeah.
individual trial, or
Yeah.
it was paper CRFs. So that lasted 2 weeks. The number one, in other words, not the owner, but the number one coordinator, he basically left 2 weeks after because he wasn't getting paid.
Mhm.
About 4 weeks later, and this is all during Christmas break, number two, who was younger than me, but he had worked at a research facility, he left. So then came, and now everybody's gonna get a kick out of this story. This comes my Danny's, Danny Bueller's day off, only at work. So the owner's like, hey, look, I got to go to New York for a vacation. They had this Pfizer expanded access program for HIV and a Merck one. So mind you, I went from third, where all I did was EDC. I didn't deal with IVRSs. I didn't know any of this. So all of a sudden it's just me. So before he leaves, he's like, no, it's okay. It's open label. So it doesn't matter what bottle they get. So I'm there popping out bottles. I think I'm doing my thing. I'm documenting everything. Hey, blood pressure, vitals. I got the weight. But when it comes time to give the bottles, I'm just handing out bottles because they're all open label.
Wow.
I'm thinking I'm a superstar. So when he gets back 2 weeks later, I'm there sitting. I'm like, I'm a big guy, but somehow I was floating. So I'm like floating. My ego's like, well, I'm too good at this. I'm just a natural. Bam! The bomb dropped really quick. We started realizing, because mind you, he's like, well, where's the IVRS confirmation? Like, IV what?
Wow. You
IV
screwed
what?
up big
Poison.
time. But it was open label, so everybody was getting the same thing, right?
Thank God. Yeah, it was all
Thank
open label.
God.
They were expanded
Yeah.
access programs. To be honest, I don't even think they paid. The doctor we were
Wow.
with, she loved. She was one of the top HIV specialists in all of Miami. She still is, I think.
Wow.
Great doctor, Dr. Raven. She was like amazing. That woman was like a wealth of knowledge. Mind you, my aunt had
Wow.
HIV patients, but I never really understood the phenotypes too well until I
Yeah.
got into research, and then you'd see how the phenotypes would change. This medication works today, but
Yep.
patient missed a couple doses and now the phenotype don't work.
So you really
So,
learned the hard way then, because that reminds me a lot of me when I started too. It's like we had psychiatry studies,
ooh,
and I was learning everything on the fly too. And we had an inpatient study, and I drove this psychotic patient in my car, thinking that he's gonna like choke me out while I'm driving him. Throughout,
he's looking at you thinking the same thing.
he's looking at me thinking the same thing. So we drop him off at the hospital, and then I go back to the office to go. I actually did it right on the IWRS, but
Nice,
this was worse than you. I did it. That part I did right. So I got the right drug. We're double blind, so it could be placebo. I didn't know.
of course.
And then I go to the hospital, give to the nurse, right? And the nurse is a different nurse. So she's like, well, I don't understand research. So just give it to the patient. So I left him an entire week supply. Okay. This
Ouch.
was really stupid. And luckily he didn't take any of them. But the psychiatrist called me pissed. Like, you left this guy entire week. He could have like really hurt himself,
Relapse.
and we had to break the blind. It was placebo, thank God. But he didn't even take any. But I learned like the hard way. Like,
Yeah,
okay, I did it right, but then I should have left with a nurse, not leave with the patient.
exactly.
And geez, so yeah, that just gave me some flashbacks there.
But what I was going to tell you, I mean, there's only one way to learn, and that's every time you mess up. I tell people all the time, I can teach you and do it for you a million times. So you don't mess up, and you got to figure out how hard it is to, like, fix issues and note the
Yeah,
files.
yeah.
That's when you
Perfect
learn.
example. Your case, you messed up because you didn't do IWRS. My case, I did IWRS. I still messed up. Somebody else could have messed up on another place. It's just impossible to predict where
Exactly.
you can make the mistake.
And to be honest, if you don't make mistakes, that's when the FDA is like, okay, where's, God, Jesus, Muhammad? I mean, nobody's perfect. You got
Exactly.
5 patients in a rush to get out of there. You're
Exactly.
gonna mess up on something, it's not if, it's what.
Crazy. So basically, you started learning, and then what happened? This guy, the business owner, what happened? Did he leave? Did he stay?
No, it's actually the opposite. I had to leave because
Oh,
then, like
you
I
left.
said, well, life has a way of throwing different curveballs at you at the same time. So I was kind of getting hit by the back, the front, it was just a lot of blows coming at once. So, I actually had to leave because then him and my aunt had a kind of falling out. They were two alpha wolves. And I'm like, all right, we're not making money. I've been working for free for a year.
Oh, so
I
he was
gotta,
not able to turn a profit?
well, remember, he had his own company that was turning a profit.
Oh, so he
I
was
was
making
working for
plenty of profit.
free.
Yeah, he was making
Yeah.
plenty of profit.
And don't get me wrong, I'm appreciative. I mean, if it wasn't because I
Yeah.
learned from him, hey, look, I took my bites, and everybody on this chat, if you ever take this path, you're gonna
Man,
get fit too.
it's
You know,
almost the same story I had. I mean, even that part, we had
because
a
every story
SMO
is
lady.
similar.
They're
At
all
the
the
end of the
same.
day, whatever you're doing, whether you're a baseball player or a research coordinator, there's going to be people trying to step on you. It's like the stock market. It never goes like that. You always have that,
Yeah.
you
The
know.
similarities are all there, like the parallels.
Exactly. But long story short, so I actually left. I started working for a silver wholesaler, believe it or not. I was just looking for any job, I was divorced, living in my sister's ladybug room. I think she tried to get on the call earlier, Victoria.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, when
Sorry,
I got divorced,
Victoria.
I ended up, yeah, I inherited her ladybug room. So imagine me, I'm 6 feet tall on a twin size bed full of ladybugs all over the wall. Traumatizing experience, to say the least.
Yeah.
But long story short, again, I stayed working as a silver wholesaler. It was a dead end job, but I didn't have a way of getting back into the research. I didn't know the doctors myself or have the confidence in myself, really was more about it. Because honestly, nowadays I'll walk into any doctor's office, and I mean, your research. If you talk to a doctor and explain it to them right, not a lot of doctors are going to say no. You know what I mean? It's interesting as long as they have the capabilities to run the trial. You got to tell them the good with the bad. You can't just tell them they're going to be millionaires. You got to show them the regulatory binder and be like, you see this?
Yeah.
You got 6 of these. But long story short, so like I said, I stayed at the silver wholesaler about a year. I got with my new girlfriend. Believe it or not, I started like studying at Fast Train, which is like a computation school. Bad mistake, because if you're not working on it day to day, all this coding, you're lost.
Yeah.
But I got my girlfriend. She had 3 jobs, so I was like, "Yeah, I can't be a deadbeat forever. Like, what is this? Like, I can't have her out hustle me. You know what I mean? She still out hustles me to this day. But long story short, I called the same gentleman that taught me research, and I'm like, "Hey, look, to be honest, I actually called them because I had found a job. It wasn't even a job, it was a contractor type thing. You remember the POS machines? I mean, they still got them. All the nightclubs, all the restaurants,
Yeah.
charge the credit cards. So I knew a lot of people. I'd go to the businesses, hey man, do you mind if I put it there? And you'd get like 0.0000001 of like a tenth of a cent. So that's really why I called them, was to see if Dr. Rabin, I knew she took credit cards. I was like, hey, if you get a POS machine there, $40 here, 70 there. It adds up. Long story short, he's like, oh, I'm looking for a coordinator. So I go over there all excited. I go over there with the credit card machine thing, but I'm actually thinking more about the research.
So the
So
same guy? The same
same
guy?
guy, same guy. So I worked free the first year. So
So
when I
this was
come back,
a year later after you
about a
left?
year and a half later, I want to
Okay.
say like a year and close to 2 years, like a year and a half, let's say.
Okay.
So then, he looks down on his piece of paper. He's like, I don't know how much you retained and da-da-da, $9 an hour. I was like, give it to me. Like, I'll take it. You know what I mean? Like I told him, hey, the last time I was here, I did it because I wanted to open up a business. I'll take the $9 an hour, and he gave me everything to do, which I'm glad, because it's the only way you learn. I kicked my butt. We worked on a lot of Novartis trials. He was huge with Novartis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Their
good
monitors
monitors,
suck.
bad
Yeah.
monitors.
Their
I won't get into the
monitors
bad
suck.
monitors. But long story short, to be honest, it was my second chance at the beginning that I wanted before. I mean, obviously nobody leaves their job to work for free for a year and live off their savings. So this time I took the bull by the horns. I took what I retained the first time around, and I made sure that there was no looking back. And to be honest, I never did look back. But within 3 months, he bumped me up to $12 an hour, and I was his site director, because
Hmm.
he had like some blood pressure issues, like literally blood
Okay.
coming out of his eyes. It was insane.
Wow.
So instead of $12 an hour, I opened up our first site. It was not next phase. It was my first site with a pulmonologist. Took off from there. Honestly, we lasted about 2 years together, me and the pulmonologist. He started getting into stem cells. which
Mm.
was a huge business. I remember we were talking about that earlier. He was one of the innovators. Actually, his wife goes around Dubai, all these places giving presentations. That's how long he's been doing it. So I kind of found myself where, wow, great, we built this business up, and now here we are a year and a half later, and we're kind of finishing these trials. And the doctor wants to go to his, who am I to stop him? You know what I mean? He's got his own ideas. He spent, I think, $250,000 on equipment. So long story short, we just basically let it go. I started working at another place, and that's when I got bit. Bad partnership idea. I wasn't experienced. I didn't know what sweat equity was.
So they offer
So
you. So this other site you went to, they offered you
a
sweat equity.
percentage. Yeah, a
Okay.
percentage. And basically, me being the idiot that I am, I was constantly like, hey, you don't need to give me that much percentage. Use this money to hire this. And I wanted to
Really?
build
Wow.
something. I mean, I wanted to build something,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I could be good, but honestly, at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to limit your growth is as good as you are. If you try to run 10 trials, you're stuck with 10 trials. You're not going to be able to do 11 or 12 or 20 or take the next leap unless you have the team around you. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I was kind of focused on that. And that's kind of when I learned the lesson where it was kind of like, oh, you kind of leave yourself vulnerable when you're not on the actions. Always worry about your shares. Don't worry if you're the
Mm-hmm.
president, secretary, worry about your shares. Long story short, they found the cheaper solution. And I'm not one to overstay my welcome. And that's when I decided to start originally CleanSearch before starting with the biobanking and all that. When it first
Hmm.
started in 2012, was more of a brokering type of company. So I
Okay.
would basically do brokering, but what ends up happening is, for one, if I can't trust you, I'm not going to be sending attorneys to send you letters, or I'm not going to be hounding you. For one,
It's a
pharmaceutical
tough
companies,
business.
yeah, pharmaceutical companies don't want you crying that somebody didn't pay you for a trial, and I wasn't going
Mm-hmm.
to ruin my shot with them. So I ended up making good friends in the business, like people that started like clients, and now honestly they're like family. Most of my clients have been with us since the beginning. The whole reason we were able to grow in Texas is because of Mohammed. He's my right hand there, and he was one of the ones that would tell me, hey, thanks, I got this trial, man, and this and that. I met this other doctor, and this other doctor, they all know you. And I'm like, it's funny, they never sent me a check or even told me anything.
Wow. So basically, you were doing a brokerage, like a study broker for sites,
Exactly. Flat
and
fee, it was 2,500. I mean, honestly, think about it.
yeah.
That's how absurd that price was back then. And people would still rip you off, because 2,500 for that, for me, was a lot, because it's
So
all I
when did
had.
you pivot? When did you pivot and realize, well, I could do more than?
Didn't take me long. Local, yeah, I mean, local people started reaching out, and I'm like, you know what? Like, how can I not stay in control? Because it's not it wasn't my site. You know what I mean? But I started doing consulting. Hey, look, I mean, this is what you need. This is what you need to have. Here's a list. This is what your doctor needs. You know what I mean? Okay, some of your doctors say, okay, perfect, good. This doctor's good. This doctor's not. And honestly, word of mouth. You never see us advertising. And like I was telling you earlier, CleanSearch has been open since 2012, and next phase came into our lives, and it was a different idea. So although I always kept my original CleanSearch clients, it was never my. You always see me wearing a next phase shirt, basically. You know what I mean? Because the SMO side, next phase came to be because a lot of people start calling you, and it ends up becoming a point where you realize that not everybody that calls you is the right client.
Mm.
So you
So
kind of like,
basically, you got all these people calling for CleanSearch, looking for a
exactly.
cheap study broker.
Well,
And
not anymore because now it's the consulting.
oh, okay, okay,
Yeah,
gotcha. Consulting, and then you realize, well, there's only so many I can actually service because there's only
exactly.
24 hours in a day. So why don't
Exactly.
I do an SMO? And then you started the.
Exactly. And then I had good friends that, for instance, Ashley Zarilla, he knows Carla because I think they worked together at the phase ones when they first started. So he was at one of the sites I worked with, and I'm like, come on, man. Like, what are you waiting for? Like, come on. Like you're on the wrong side. Long story short, I finally suckered him, my sister. I was finally able to sucker a bunch of people to join my crazy crusade.
Wow.
And
So what does CleanSearch do now in respect to next phase research? Can you kind of give
exactly,
us both, like an
exactly.
SMO? We understand. I want to get into the SMO too, but what does CleanSearch do today?
To be honest, what we're doing is we're reaching out to local physician offices, and basically we're buying. samples from them, whether it's sputum, because it depends on who's buying the samples from me,
I
from the
see.
company.
I see.
So they could be sputum, they could be
I
people
have
that
a
are doing
client. I have a
collection.
client for you. Chris and I,
Perfect.
we do consulting. We help sites get studies for a monthly fee.
Nice.
Yeah, we have like sites pay us 1,300 a month. We get them studies, do their budgets.
A
We
great
don't get them
price.
free any studies, but we apply. So every 3 months they usually get on average one. But sometimes
Nice.
we'll get random people calling. The other week somebody called about we need blood samples for a cancer. So I'll introduce them to
Perfect. Awesome. Awesome. That's, I mean, again, how you grow is by helping each other
you.
out. You know what I
Exactly,
mean?
exactly. Just
But,
remind me.
for sure, for sure. But I mean, and then we opened up next phase, went to the first D. Like I said, we work good. Our clients, they learn to trust us at the beginning. Obviously, it's like pulling teeth, especially when you work with one of these big managed care providers, because it's very competitive. So the last thing they want is their patients, they get paid on a capitation basis or whatnot. So the
Right,
last
right.
thing they want is their patients going to any other office. So at the beginning, it was like pulling teeth, but then they started realizing, hey, these guys aren't here to rip me off. We make everybody money. We always tell people, I want to make you a millionaire so I could be 100,000 there. I get 10 of you, I'm a millionaire too. You know what I mean? Like people love that.
So is that your pitch? So let's I guess let's talk about next phase because I'm always trying to perfect the pitch, and I'm not an SMO, so I don't approach. But the approaching physician is the same thing, no matter if it's SMO or you're gonna partner with them, whatever. At the end of the day, it's the same thing. How do you typically approach a doctor, or is it that they approach you first?
That's exactly what I was going to tell you. To be honest, every single one of our clients has been word of mouth. Our Vegas clients are because what
Wow.
happens? You start working with one managed care provider and they go to their conferences, just like we go to ideas and our bios.
Yeah.
We go to their conferences and they talk to each other. And when they're onto something good, luckily for us, knock on wood, you know what I mean? They consider us good.
So you found your niche then with next phase through managed care, partnering with
Yeah,
managed care. So these are
exactly.
what large medical practice. Explain just
Groups. Yeah,
one
medical
minute what's a
groups.
managed care like.
Yeah. So for instance, nowadays in healthcare, there's a lot of HMO involvement, and basically what they're doing is they're doing managed care. So they're trying to keep the patients from going to the hospitals. And I mean, I'll explain what little I know because since I'm on the research field,
Yeah.
I more or less get a grasp, but I'm not too familiar with
Right.
it. But
Right.
for instance, they'll get capitation. So let's say it's $1,000, just to throw a number out there. Every patient you have on your plan is $1,000. I don't have to see you to get that $1,000. Now, it's managed care. So for them, it is a little tricky because sometimes all our trials is like, well, take them off their metformin, or take them off this and put them on this or placebo. So that part gets a little complicated. But like I said, I mean, once the doctor reads the protocol and understands what he's really doing, the most important thing is to have a doctor that wants to be involved, because no matter how big the group is, if the doctor is not involved, you're not going to get any leeway. You're not going to be able to find
Right.
the
Right.
patients. You're going to run into a bunch of red tape.
Right. Right.
So basically, that's literally how we started. We were fortunate. Our first managed care was actually me and my sister's pediatrician when we were kids. He's got a huge
Wow.
group. Yeah, he's got a huge group. They actually opened up a phase one and everything now. So that was our first managed care group. And then from there, the owner of that group talked to us, talked to the owners of another group in the area. They contacted us. And to be honest, it's kind of grown from there. I'm not gonna lie. I wish they were all success stories. We have my Vegas side. You see that? You see what's missing there? That's all Vegas. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's not all successes, but at the end of the day, hey, even when it's a disaster, you show your face, you're there and you fix the things that you can, and the CRO is gonna appreciate that you're doing the best you can. In addition to obviously the SMO clients, I mean, there are consulting clients. If somebody's going to get an audit, okay, I'll be more than happy to go check your files. You know what I mean? But
I
it's going to
see.
cost you.
So you
You
don't
know
you don't so you do have pricing model for people that are not part of your SMO.
exactly. I mean, to be honest, little by little, especially with the whole biobanking and all that time that we've had for that has kind of gotten. But honestly, I mean, and I finally got back in contact with Carla, so I think we already figured out.
Carla with
You
the
know,
phase one. So who's your client for the biobanking? Is it drug company like sponsors?
there's a few of them. I mean, we've worked with iSpecimen, we've worked with Science 37, we've worked with so many
Oh,
companies.
okay.
We've worked with a bunch of different companies already. We had sites in Eastern Europe a while
Hmm.
back.
Wow.
That's how we first got started. We had a hospital. It's in Kiev. It was basically like the National Oncology Center of all of the Ukraine. that was our first like lucky pitch. You know what I mean? Like we
Wow.
had another partner. He moved over to another company now, but he's from there. So luckily for us, he was able to get our foot in the door with the Eastern European Medical Board, and that's how we got into the biobanking. Honestly, I mean, the samples were so good that the people that were buying the samples from us were like, "Hey, they only have to be 70%, cancer." But then our doctors from over there, the samples were like 99%, 98% of the actual tissue was cancerous.
Wow.
So from there it just grew, and more clients have come in. Obviously there's a lot of confidentiality. There's other names that I'm not allowed to say.
Right.
So I'm just saying what I am allowed to say out
So
loud.
these business models are completely different, but
Yeah,
you're able to, I guess, manage them both.
two teams.
Two separate teams.
Exactly. It's the only
I
way to
see.
do it. I mean,
Yeah.
clinical research is not a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday job.
Right.
I know for me, 9 to 5 is me on site, helping, checking files and stuff. And then once you get home, you got to start networking.
So with next phase, are you actually on the ground, like doing the
We are,
coordinating work still
yeah.
and all that stuff?
For instance, in Las Vegas, they hire the coordinators. But for instance, with the group that we mentioned earlier, Cano, it's our coordinators. Our pediatrician Homestead is our coordinators. If we could if we could restart, obviously we've learned things that we did wrong and things that we did right along the way. I mean, to be honest, with the big groups, it's probably the best way to do it, just because the patients are there. Like, what does the farmer want?
Hmm.
Here it is. We have it. Here's this group. You got to
So
take care of
you're
it.
hiring the coordinators basically.
Exactly. But now there are, like I was saying, in Tampa, basically my site handles all they hire their own staff. We just come and we teach, whoever their site director is and their coordinators say, this is how we do it. We
I
generate the
see.
sources.
I see.
Yeah, it's
What in your, because Chris and I were talking about this before, but we decided because we own like a handful of our own sites. They're all independently owned. And
perfect.
then all these leads we get from YouTube, we have a consulting service for them, like a flat fee every month. No
Exactly.
percentage, nothing else, just flat fee every month. We're trying to grow our site network. We're always concerned this is why we didn't go the SMO route. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this because number one, I was worried the SMOs had a bad reputation for a while. It's coming back in favor now, so that's
Yeah.
probably good for you. That's number one. Number two, I was always worried if I'm not there, if I don't have a presence, the doctors are gonna figure it out and they're gonna cut me out of the picture. Those two things kept me from pursuing the SMO route. What do you
Yeah.
think? What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, to be honest, I tell everybody always, I'm like, you got to look at everybody like they're going to rip you off in the long run. Unfortunately, you know what I mean?
Right.
So enjoy the ride while it's there, because why am I going to not make money now, worrying about what he's going to do to me 2 years from now?
I
Here's
see.
number
So
two.
basically you just basically say, look, I already expect this to happen, so I'm just gonna do what I
I
can right
honestly,
now.
how is it? Expect the worst, but hope for the best.
Okay,
Because
okay.
honestly, I mean, I hope my kids are doing business with their kids
Right,
30 years from now. It's what I
right.
hope for. But the sad reality is that there's a million of us, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
everybody's constantly knocking on those doors. So at the end of the day, you got to be prepared and know what's to come. Now, having said that, yeah, the doctor might leave you, but do you think the doctor's going to do as good without you as with you? Because I've been
No,
ripped off a
they
bunch of
won't.
times.
But that's not enough to but they don't know that and that's enough to break your
They
business up.
find out quick. They
They-
find out quick. Trust
do
me.
they
It
do they
never
come
lasts.
back to you? Do they come
Oh,
back?
6 months later, yeah, when they owe you money and they're all with the tails between the legs, and you're like, okay, yeah, pay me, and I'll be more than happy to
So now you
restart.
can renegotiate more favorable terms.
Well, first things first, pay what you back owed, because I'm not making a new deal with somebody that hasn't paid their old one.
I
You know what I
see.
mean?
I
And
see.
and I don't necessarily look at it as an opportunity to change the deal I have with you. If I had a percentage with you and we agreed on it, and you didn't pay me that, I'll be more than happy to work with you moving forward at the same percentage. You
Wow.
pay me the one you owe me. Like I said, to be honest, when you deal with the larger groups, they're not they're not nickel and diming you. Like when I started doing the brokering, I did, because you got a lot of mom and pop research, which slowly but
Yeah.
surely, as you can see, especially with virtual trials and things like that, they're not going to be around in 10 years.
Right.
It's
Right.
either first or you're going to be out of the picture. That's
Right.
actually one piece of advice that I'll give everybody on the podcast. Get yourself virtual certified. Make sure you're first in line before IQVIA and Syneos, because they're already on the race. I saw Icon today was sending out decentralized trial questionnaires.
They're all in it.
Well, I
But
mean,
I think that's gonna coexist though with the traditional trials.
well, hybrids, but again, remember with the hybrid, they're only going to need one PI in Pensacola. So if you're in Tampa, they'll pay you for the
Yeah.
referral.
But here's the thing, Daniel. I guess we can talk about that too. This whole thing, this whole idea that you only need one PI in a region because the patients, you're gonna somehow magically get the patients, and then the patients are gonna, like, that's the problem, is the patients. The
Yeah,
Where are they gonna get the patient? Patients don't just go to strange doctors. They don't know what research is. They go to their own doctor, and their
exactly.
own doctor's never gonna refer a patient to another doctor, even if you sign a million forms saying we will not steal your patient. They're not gonna do that.
The only
So
problem is that pharma has all the money in the world, and let's face it, any problem can be fixed on money. So they'll figure it out. They got Markin.
hmm.
What was the company? You had mentioned another one, Markin Catalent. I think you had mentioned.
Catalent is the logistics and all that,
There you go.
IT logistics.
So,
Viva.
yeah, so it's pretty simple if you think about it. Look, okay, so I hire the nurses that live in Pensacola because
Hmm.
let's say the doctor's in Tampa. I got the nurse already that's going to handle the work there. The pharmacy, I call a local pharmacy. You want to make an extra $150? Just look at your budget, right? The breakdown, and
Yep.
just think of all the things you won't get paid for. Now, that's the negative if you look at it that way, but now if you look at the positive, but now multiply it times 100 or 150 because you're not going to have a patient in Key West from Tampa. You know what I mean? So it's going to be a learning process.
Yeah.
COVID just expedited all these processes.
I think these two things coexist in parallels.
Yeah,
Um, I don't think traditional trials are going to get displaced by this. I think they're going to be able to do studies they wouldn't have done otherwise using this model. Because
yeah, like oncology.
yeah, because how are you going to get a patient in Key West to even consider doing a research study with a doctor that they don't know? Because they're
Yeah,
going to go to their doctor and their doctor is going to say, "Nah, I don't think you should do that."
yeah, and it even happens when you see the big like CROs, like in Miami. I know Cineas has the phase 1 where Carlo was at. I know
Okay.
IQVIA has centers outside of the phase 1s. I would have to guess that the mom and pop sites probably have an easier time of finding those patients than the big groups, just
Exactly.
because, yeah, there's
Exactly.
nobody. It's like I always say, Mr. Aetna. I know there's not a Mr. Aetna, but you could do
Yeah.
a collection trial and Mr. Aetna is not going to look through his database to get to that patient. Who's going to do
They're
it?
not. They're not. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, it's to me, maybe I'm wrong, but pharma, the way pharma sees this is like you just said, we've got money. Which
Yeah,
doctor's gonna say no to money? But look, these doctors who treat their patients in these community clinics, if they're not doing their research, they're not referring patients.
exactly.
And so then if let's say you get the best marketer in the world to reach these patients and the patients are interested in joining this virtual trial. The patients are going to ask their doctor, "Hey, should I do this?" Their doctor's going to
Yeah,
say, "No. Why would you
yeah,
do that?"
exactly. And they'll listen to their doctors. 'Cause, I mean, the number
Exactly.
one way to recruit is if the doctor believes in the product, the patients are going to follow them into the trial.
So I honestly think the best way to reduce disparities, get more, we talk about this. You're a member of Latinos in Clinical Research. You're a regular. Thank you for that. We got to get you to present, by the way, one more time.
Thank you for letting us join, for letting me join.
Oh, are you kidding? You're gonna present like in the fall. We're booked till the fall, but in the fall, like
I'm
we're
a
gonna
hand model too. I don't know if you guys know I'm a hand model as well.
it's a beautiful hand. But uh reducing disparities, all these things, getting more patients involved, raising the awareness, that actually comes to fruition from what you're doing with your SMO.
Yeah,
Because you're on the ground going to different doctor, mom and pop, hey, you should do this study. Here's what clinical research is. This is how you get more minorities involved. You go to the doctors treating those patients in those community. You don't just do a decentralized trial and say, okay, we're going to get all the patients from the Florida Panhandle to join virtually because they love us. And
yeah,
it's
it's gonna
this
be
place,
tough.
three area codes away. That's not going to happen. I don't think.
No,
I think I'm missing something.
and I definitely hope you're right because honestly, I mean, the only thing I can think of is like they're trying to get us out of the way. You know what I
They
mean?
are. They are.
Yeah,
Now, that doesn't mean pharma's not going to try.
of
And
course.
I get your idea with get yourself certified and all this stuff, because whether they fail or succeed, they're spending money on this.
Well,
So you
and
might
think
as
about it.
well take advantage of that.
And half the trials, okay, so let's say not on, but you got to imagine at least half the trials moving, maybe 5 years from now, half the trials are going to be either virtual or hybrid. hybrid
Right.
being like a model of
Hybrid's
what
a
we're
big
doing now.
thing. Hybrid's a real thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love it
Complete
because
completely decentralized, not I don't think is a real thing.
yeah, I think it's gonna be tough too.
The
Like
only the only way completely decentralized virtual works is for those patients that are like nerds that research everything latest treatment. They don't even ask their doctor and they'll look
yeah,
for these study. But you and
exactly.
I both know that is like what, less than 1% of patients,
Yeah. And
right?
nowadays, all the medications that are coming out are injectables too. So patients are twice as scared. Like, what? What? Like, what?
Or
Asthma
gene
injectable.
therapy, or gene therapy, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. We got an acne trial now that's going to start up. We just had the PSV and it's an injectable. I'm like, I
Mhm.
mean, mind you, most of the monoclonals are. So at the beginning, I'm kind of like, you're going to get teenagers to want to inject themselves. Having said that, I honestly don't think it's going to be as hard, but nonetheless, injections for acne. It's
Right.
insane.
And see, exactly right. Those kids' parents are going to be going to their pediatrician or their doctor and say, "Hey, we saw this study in a different place. What do you know about this?" Their doctor's going to say, "I don't know anything about that, but that's
Yeah.
risky.
Yeah,
That's
I would never
risky for
inject my
me."
kid without having to on a clinical trial.
You
That's
see,
what they'll
so
say.
that's going to be the problem, like 99% of the time. So,
Yeah.
but hybrid is a very real thing. I
Yeah.
think
And it's
hybrid is real.
amazing from what little bit I've grasped out of it.
Yeah,
To be
yeah.
honest, at the last dia, well, I'm sure you went to too, it was 2019.
San
Half
Diego?
the, yeah, San Diego, my favorite city. By the way, we were talking about earlier, it's my second favorite city behind my
I
hometown.
mean, I basically live there. I'm in Orange County now. I'm gonna be in
Oh,
Yuma, Arizona soon, and then eventually San Diego after that. So yeah,
nice. Well, you could always stay in Arizona and then have a nice little condo in San Diego.
we'll do
There's
both.
options.
We'll do both.
I haven't
One,
forgiven you guys though for getting rid of, is it Anthony's Grotto? That was right there on the bay. The
what
little
do you mean?
restaurant in the water.
Oh, that place is gone?
It's gone, yeah. Anthony's, but I think they may have another one because we looked for it. We wanted to throw a party there
Yeah,
for the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
dia.
yeah. There's another restaurant I think that took over, and it's like a tourist trap.
Exactly, exactly. It
Yeah,
is. It is. They
it's just for the
remodeled
view.
it.
Those places that are just like great views never have good food
Yeah, of
because
course.
they don't need to. You need
Anthony's
one
was
or the
cool
other. You
though.
need great view or great food. Usually, you don't need both because it costs too much.
Well, Anthony's gives me good memories because I had the view, and then the Dolphins beat the Chargers like I think it was 31-0 a couple years ago.
Oh man, the
So for
Chargers
me, it
were
was
my
like a
team.
win-win.
The Chargers were my team till they moved.
I know, but that sucks. They'll be back, man. They've already left. Well,
They'll
actually,
be
no, they
back. I'm
had enough.
I'm a Niner fan now. So well, I've always been a Niner fan, but
We're not
I
gonna hold
was
that against you.
yeah, it's okay. We blew two Super Bowls in this last decade.
Yeah, but you guys won four. Dolphins haven't won one in my whole lifetime, so I'm
Jeez,
still suffering.
that's crazy. But Daniel, we got to do definitely more like a part 2 and a part 3 because you got a lot. I mean, this was just enough to get to where you currently are and talk a little bit about the future. But we gotta have you on again when you have time to talk about your two businesses, like in depth,
Okay,
what they do, because that's like at least another hour,
for sure, if not more.
if not more. And then definitely for Latinos, but I'm thinking part 2 like soon, like next week or the week after if you have
I-
time.
I'm very flexible, so I mean,
Okay.
you got my number, man. We text back and forth,
Yep, yep. I'm
and next
glad
week I'm
Carla put us
available
in
too.
touch.
So
I'm glad Carla put us in touch because I want to dissect the businesses and look into, this was just to get people's beak wet. Okay, this is like,
exactly.
look what Daniel's doing. You hear it. I bring you guys other entrepreneurs. It's not just me all the time. You guys get bored from just my stories. Now you have Daniel's story, Carla's stories, different entrepreneurs in the industry that are doing way better than me, by the way, like at their businesses.
I
So
wish.
it's good. It's good to bring them on and share their experiences and have conversations like we just did about decentralized trials. No, Daniel, I think it's going to be like this, but I do agree with you on this point. I think that kind of debate is good to have and not just all you hear on LinkedIn is like from pharma what they want, what they
Yeah, of course,
regurgitate, and then all the vendors and consultants echo what they say, and then that
because
becomes
they
the
want those
truth.
vendor accounts.
Exactly, and then that becomes the truth all of a sudden, and that's not the case. We're here in the in the trenches,
In real
and
time.
we can tell you that's not the case. That's a pipe dream, it for the most part. So thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it.
Thank
I
you
got to
guys,
jump
man,
on another Zoom, but we'll set something up next week if you can.
for
And
sure.
I can't wait for that one. And thank you everybody for watching and listening. We're gonna have links to Daniel's LinkedIn in the show notes, so go
Thank you.
click follow him on LinkedIn, connect with him. Go ask him questions like, "Hey, what are you talking about when you said this?" Uh, Ask him things like that. Connect, network, and definitely we'll do this again, Daniel. Okay.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for you guys. I'm sorry about all the headaches earlier with the connectivity
Oh,
issue.
no worry, though. It came out perfect. It's an instant classic. So thank you,
There you
Daniel. I
go.
appreciate it.
You gotta what do you call it? You gotta dose the crazy little by little. So part
That's
one.
right. Titrate up. Thank
Thank
you
you, man.
guys for watching. Catch y'all later. Bye
Have a
bye.
great afternoon, guys.